Welcome to Grief and Gratitude Podcast. We're your hosts, Mandy and Crystal.
This is a space for honest conversations about loss, healing, and everything in between. Each week, we share stories, perspectives, and moments that remind us that even in the hardest seasons, gratitude can still exist. Thank you for sharing space with us. We're really glad you're here. Welcome, everyone. We are here today with Crystal, of course.
Hello.
And we have Matt and Monica here. Matt and Monica actually have their own podcast called the Matt and Monica Podcast. And we met them through social media. So I'm just going to hand it over to them and they can tell you about themselves or their story, and we will go from there.
Yeah, first, I just want to say thank you for having us on. It's really awesome to meet you guys and just to be a part of this.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I figure I'll let you introduce yourself first.
Okay, I'm Monica, and I'll just say a little bit of my story, from when I was younger, just to get a little idea of who I am. I grew up in a really, really small town. It was a really nice little town, K through 12, very small school. We're all friends, and I had a pretty good childhood. My parents were divorced when I was, I think, about 4 years old, and I was a cheerleader and I was a dancer. I did jazz, tap, and ballet when I was little, so I wasn't a huge sports person, but dance was huge for me. When I, was out of high school, I went to college for about a year, and long story short, back in 2003-ish, I got with my ex and had a 7-year span of a very deep and hard abusive relationship. And there was addiction involved. And in 2009, escaped pretty much from my life with my 2 kids that were about 3 and 4 years old, and never looked back. And of course, ups and downs. I've been clean since 2009. So I like to celebrate that and let people know that if I can go through that and be strong, that they can too. I've had a long time to heal and grow and learn and make mistakes and grow from my mistakes and stuff. And I don't know, it's a little smidgen of, a very small smidgen of my upbringing and the hard things that I've been through so far.
So I guess I'll lead off of that. So I grew up also, had a pretty normal childhood. I say normal, it really was in the grand scheme of things compared to a lot of people. But it's kind of relevant. I got married young. I was with my ex-wife since we were high school sweethearts and stuff. And from when I was 14 up until I was 27, had a pretty decent relationship. Ended up getting divorced at 27 though, and was kind of lost. Ended up with 3 kids together. And at the time they were 6 months, 5 and 7. And that was my first adversity, because my parents are still together to this day. Never experienced that. It was a challenge. And I had a couple years in law enforcement as far as employment goes. So I had that experience, and I went into the military, which was completely random, which if anybody knew me any better, I'm a pretty random person. I don't put a lot of thought into pretty big decisions a lot. I just kind of lean into it. And I joined the Army Reserve, did 8 years in the reserves while starting a career in IT at a casino. And I now work full-time as a cybersecurity engineer. And because of adversity and going through a very difficult custody battle for the last couple of years up until last year, we decided hey, let's talk about life. And we started this podcast, which initially was just about navigating what we were navigating, not really talking about that per se, but we
started off talking about our relationship, and our relationship is very we love each other so much. We're each other's best friends. We want to be together all the time. We're that annoying couple. And sometimes people look up to that and they're wow, you guys have such a good relationship. How is it so good? But in the beginning of our relationship, it was kind of rocky. And so people could relate to us more when we were very real and open about having the rocky parts in our relationship and how we got over it.
Yeah. We believe vulnerability is strength, which is not always easy to lean into that.
That's really helpful. I actually didn't know much at all. And I think, Monica, knowing your history too, and to speak to recovery, majority of clients I work with in my day job, in my field, are experiencing recovery. And it's real bridging those who are homeless and incarcerated to treatment. Hearing stories like yours it's really powerful, right? To know that you can move through it and meet someone and have a healthy relationship and build together.
I haven't really said a lot in detail at all about my past. I'm very open about it, but on social media so far, I haven't really said much, but I have this huge urge and calling to really talk about it, hopefully sometime soon, because people do need to know that they can have a life that they want and that they're worthy of a happy life, no matter what they've done in the past.
Absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. And Matt, my goodness, military and then the IT casino thing, that got me right there. And I think speaking to separation, right? Getting married young and then separating young, 27, to kind of to start again can be really challenging.
Yeah, that's definitely challenging when you have your entire life kind of ripped out from underneath you, and then moving back into mom and dad's basement. That's love the sound of that.
Well, I think when we're younger, right, our teens, 20s, it's like we think we know. You think it's planned out and you lean into that plan, then you start again.
Yeah.
So from here, Matt, does it make sense for you to begin your story of loss?
Yeah. So I kind of have to back up to the adversity of the custody battle, because that plays a huge role in all of this, and help lead me with this when I lose my track.
Yep.
But so we had a pretty civil relationship, relatively in comparison to a lot of people, for many, many years. Things took a negative turn. Just the circumstances changed, and it's hard to really dive into that because we don't, I don't want to come across like I'm bashing or anything like that. So I try to tiptoe around that. But things weren't good, and when I say they weren't good, I don't know what was more difficult to navigate: the custody battle of 2 years of dealing with family core and you name it, or losing my kids. And there's a lot of people that hear that and be like, wait, what? Like, how could anything be worse than losing your kids? And I'm not saying it's worse, but it's a very different kind of adversity. And when you're dealing with adversity that is completely preventable, when I say that, it's the writing's on the wall of what's going on and nobody's helping. It's just so inherently flawed and frustrating. You feel helpless. And I've never experienced that before. I guess I didn't realize until I had to deal with it firsthand of how flawed things could be. That being said, at the beginning of my years are all kind of blending in, but so about 2 years ago, so we were a little bit into starting a podcast, kind of at wit's end with life, just not knowing really what to do. We started going to church, and that's heavily relevant to our story as well, because of the adversity. We started going to church, kind of just like grasping at straws at this point. And I remember saying to my son, my youngest, he would have been 10 or 11 at the time, and I remember saying to him one night, after we started going for a few Sundays, I'm like, I believe that going to church, just that positivity, it can help anybody. And I was really implying, like, maybe he'll get his mom to maybe start going to church too, because I know we were at a point where we needed it. I'm sure she could use it. She was struggling, and lo and behold, she started going to church. The thing that caught us off guard was she started going to our church, and we're like, what the hell? That's not what we meant. And first, it was a tough pill to swallow. It was, just because, again, there was a lot of animosity there and a lot of just a bad situation. But I remember coming home with her and saying to her, I'm like, you know what, best case scenario, maybe it helps her. And, regardless of the animosity, best case scenario is everybody doing better, including her. And sure enough, as time went by, like, she went from sitting on the opposite end of the church, and then, a few months later, she's sitting a little close to us. Then she's sitting behind us, and it kind of got to a point where at the end of church, we were kind of mingling with each other, even, which was, with how bad things were. Again, it was shocking. And
so to give people a little perspective of the time, though, that was over like about a year or so. That whole time was like, she went to our church and stuff, and then getting closer. And
like we would kind of stand in a circle with the kids and stuff. And we would even like kind of have small talk with each other around. And this is all while like there's court still going on and stuff. So it was a lot. I go back to the power of forgiveness. It's something I normally, old me would say is kind of corny, but man, if you can step outside what has happened and just try to move forward and move past the negativity, it's incredibly, incredibly helpful for everybody, especially kids, because man, people don't realize, I never realized how hard a custody battle can be on the children. I mean, it sounds obvious, but people have no idea the implications that could have.
Well, and I do just want to speak to that. A majority of my work too, I'm in family and criminal court. So what you express, and part of the work I do, it is to support people in navigating that process, because unless you're in it and know it, you really don't get it. And myself going through one for over a year, from the money to the emotions to the things, I wanted to create something to almost like be for someone else what I needed, because you can't quite verbalize it. It is, you are in like fight or flight, and you feel like you're fighting for your life. You're fighting for your children's life. You can't quite express it. So I think to speak to that and to add in the layer of church and a higher power and forgiveness, that whole workings is really amazing, that within that you were still able to, put your ego aside and say, if this is good, right? Because if it's good for our child's other parent, right, it's good to know that deep down. So, yeah, it's incredible that you did that. And I really commend you. I think it's a beautiful thing. Your children were also able to observe this.
And I think we got to, so we're about a year and a half of this going on up until spring of last year. We're going to the same church and stuff. And this is actually very recent, whereas, so I'm trying not to confuse people here, but my 12-year-old son has a cell phone where his calendar is synced with his mom's calendar for whatever reason. It's just been like that. She got him the phone for a couple years now. And about 2 weeks ago, there was a notification that come up on his phone that said, felt my presence with God, or I'm paraphrasing, something to that effect. Felt the Holy Spirit for the first time. And this is 2 weeks ago. And there's a lot of significance to that. And I also want to say, I don't, even with our podcast, I don't push faith upon at all to anybody. We actually said when we first started our podcast, no religion, no politics. However, I've transitioned into saying, like, I'm going to tell people what has worked for our family, because if we didn't have that element of faith, there's no way in hell we'd be here talking to you right now. I'm not saying I would have been suicidal, but I don't know where I'd be or we would be. But so to get back to April of last year, everything started getting better. When I say everything, I mean like with the custody situation, the co-parenting, because co-parenting for a while, it was unheard of. It was your house, your rules. And it sucked because when you're trying to parent kids that you have 50% of the time and you have different rules and not being on the same page, it's just detrimental to the kids' development. And so April rolls around, everything's better, animosity's gone, co-parenting's happening, we're civil when we're talking, and we go into May. The end of May, we had a court hearing or something, and we got into the waiting room, and it was crazy.
I would say it was almost like divine intervention with the atmosphere. And in the waiting room, normally it's pretty busy. It was just him, myself, and Natasha.
And the court, guard or whatever that signs you in. So it's just us. We've been going for 2 years, and it was never the case like that, ever. But and then she sits I think 2 seats down from her instead of on the other side or anything. And we're just sitting there, and we've been in the same exact room so many other times where there's so much tension in the air. I mean, it was, I hate fighting with anyone. So it was very difficult with me, but there ended up being a little bit of small talk. And then next thing you know, her and Monica and Natasha end up having a little bit of small talk and laughing about the kids. And it was again, this was unheard of, and it was great. It was healing. And so, and I think even the guard was sitting there. She knew who we were, and seeing us in and out of there for a couple of years. I think she got up at one point, just walked away, I'm going to leave them alone.
Well, I think Natasha's lawyer took so long to go talk to her because he saw it and he's like, I'm not saying anything right now, letting this just play out.
So when my attorney came over, I said something to him. I'm like, hey, is there any way we can do mediation or something? Because that was the weird thing. We were 2 years in. Nobody ever said anything as far as the attorneys or the court or the judge, anything about actually mediating and trying to resolve this. They kept kicking the can down the road like it was, I believe, working as intended. I believe there's some sort of incentive behind that, but that's another podcast. But
it is another podcast I want to do. Let me just say that.
Yes.
I would love to. Love to.
For real.
But
go ahead.
Yeah, it's a whole
No,
yeah.
it's a whole thing, but I think, yeah, it's pretty amazing. In family court, I always say the crossover of family court, the feeling of family court and criminal court sometimes feels so similar to me, and it absolutely should not. And where mediation and support should be involved, right? I don't see that happen enough. Or you really see the parents, and then it also impacting the children. And so, yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I will keep that in mind.
So yeah, I pitched it to my attorney, and he's like, yeah, let me talk to her attorney. And like within a few minutes, he comes over. He's like, yeah, he's like, we're gonna postpone the court date. And I think it was like a week later or something. They never called us. My attorney never said anything. We get a letter in the mail like our hands are washed clean of this situation. And I was just like, wow, this is June of last year. And I remember in that time frame, it's funny. I still occasionally I'll go through my social media messages to friends or people reaching out asking how we're doing. And I remember I said to other people, I said, life is so good right now. Like all my worries, all my adversity, everything, everybody I love and care about is doing good. It's just things are so good. And things continued to get better from that point on as well, even between Natasha and us, to the extent in July, this would have been the Friday before the accident that we experienced. The Friday before, I picked up my daughter, and that's actually a major detail I left out. My daughter, about 2 years ago, decided she wanted to stay with mom full time. It was devastating for me, but it's when you have no co-parenting, and she had more free roam, to say the least, at mom's house. And we don't have a strict home by any means, but I tell my kids, hey, like, you're going to do whatever you're going to do outside of our home. However, don't bring shit into our house. No vapes, none of that shit. Like, I hope I raised you to do the right thing. You know, I lost my sister to an overdose in 2020. So like our family was already exposed to the direction of, you know, where things can go. And so I'm trying not to go all over the place. So going back to the Friday before the accident, I actually picked up my daughter and my two boys from their mom's house on a Friday. And again, we did 50-50 custody. And I took her out to dinner with my boys, and we had a beautiful night, unforgettable night. That Sunday morning, we went to church with my late son, Tyler, my 16-year-old, and just her, I, and Tyler. I think my son Bradley was at a friend's house. Ellie's never really went to church with us. She did one time, which was it was a blessing. Yeah. So Sunday morning, and this was huge. So we go into church, we sit down, myself, Tyler, and Monica, and then in the other aisle, my ex-wife came into church late, and she sat in the aisle next to us. She never sat with us; she sat kind of close to us or whatever. But for whatever reason, we felt compelled to ask her if she wanted to sit with us, and she did. She did. She came over and she sat on the other side of my son Tyler, and it was probably one of, if not the most powerful moment of my entire life. And here this was before the, you know, most tragic loss of my life. July 17th, and this is the day that I'll never forget. I was at my desk, and before I got that phone call, I got a text message from my 12-year-old son, Bradley. It was a picture of a Porsche. He loves cars, and this is probably like 3:00 in the afternoon or so, and he was going camping with his mom, his brother, and his sister, and some family members. And I completely forgot about it. When my kids are on mom's time, I have enough to keep track of. I don't really know what my kids are doing. But needless to say, he was riding in a vehicle with his Aunt Jen, which was in front of his mom, my son, and my daughter, and 3 dogs. And about an hour after I got that text message of that car, I get a phone call from him, and he knew I was at work. And this would have been about 4:15 on the Thursday afternoon. And I answer my phone, and Bradley says, "Dad," he's like, "there's an accident. It's so bad." You know, he was frantic. He's like, "Oh, they can't get mom out of the car." And at this point, I didn't even know my kids were in the car. I just didn't occur to me. And I said to him, I'll never forget it, because I was looking back very, very impressed with his maturity. And I told him, "Listen, I can't really understand you. You got to take 3 deep breaths and then talk to me." And he did. I had to hear him take 3 slow, deep breaths. He's like, "Dad, there's an accident. It's really bad. They can't get mom out of the car." Okay, I'm like, "Where are you?" And he's like, "I don't know." And I'm like, "Well, I need you to open up your Google Maps and take a screenshot and send it to me." And I ended up figuring out a generalized idea of where he was. And I ended up calling her with my work phone, putting it on speakerphone, telling her there's an accident. I don't know what's going on. Just I'll let you listen in, but other than that,
You're just
I'm
listening.
Bradley. So I'm jumping in my truck, still on the phone with Bradley, have her on speakerphone, and it was an hour and 15 minutes away from where I was working, and I'm driving to that location. As I'm driving, I get these text notifications from my daughter's cell phone that there's crash detected, SOS or whatever. Got like 6 of them all at once. And as I was driving, I'm talking to my son, trying to, keep him calm and stuff. And and like, I think if I recall correctly, he brought up or we brought up something that he wanted to pray, and like we did. And I'm driving. My composure was like, I was all right. I was doing okay. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, it's probably worse than what he's saying. He's 12. And continue driving. Then he's like, Dad, there's a helicopter landing. And I'm like, okay, that's never good if there's a helicopter involved in a motor vehicle accident. And I don't know what time frame it was or in what order this happened, but at that point I realized it was bad, and I think I asked about who else was anyone else in the car, and that's when he told me Kylie and Tyler were in the car. And unfortunately, I realized at that point it was serious. I was getting closer to the intersection and drive up to the scene. It was like a movie. I was about 100 yards away from where I saw the EMS and stuff. And as I get out of my truck, I started jogging towards like where it looked like the vehicle would have been staged where my son was, because that's all I cared about was getting to where Bradley was. And as I'm jogging to it, I hear screaming from my Mac's sister-in-law, just screaming, this morbid scream. And I hear her screaming my name, Matt, they're gone. And I'm like, at this point, I didn't know who they are, but I ended up, I go to the vehicle where my son Bradley was, and I picked him up and hold him in my arms. And the cop kind of told me at the same time that my son Tyler, he didn't make it, and Natasha didn't make it. And at this exact moment, just like a movie, it went from not raining to just downpouring. Like it was almost surreal on how like when it started raining, the timing of the rain. And something I definitely want to get to also, when I was standing there, there was a look on a police officer's face that cut through me. To this day, that's just one of the things of the scene of the accident that I can just remember, just a look on this young guy's face. And so I saw Sheriff Carpinelli. He's the head of the sheriff's department there, and he gives me a hug, and he's like, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And I'm just like, "Just please pray for our family." And so my daughter at this point was being airlifted to Upstate Hospital. I didn't know the extent of her injuries at all. I kind of was just floored and didn't know what was going on. So I end up getting in the back of my truck, the back seat of my own truck, because it started pouring rain. And Bradley got in the front passenger seat, and this lady she was from a traumatic loss like nonprofit where I believe their job is to show up to bad scenes like that to just try to help out kids or anybody that's involved, and maybe even parents too. And this lady gets into the back of my truck. I mean, this is 3 to 5 minutes after we were just told my ex-wife and my son didn't make it. And like this lady's in the back seat of my truck with me, handing me like coloring books for Bradley and a stuffed animal. And she was nervous as hell. Like I felt bad. I felt bad for her, and Bradley is taking the stuffed animal. He's taking this stuff that he didn't give a shit about at the time, but he still cared for her. And like, him and I were just like, we didn't even know what just happened. Definitely in shock. So we didn't hang out there much longer. I had one goal at this point, was to get to the hospital where my daughter was, and to pick her up first. But so we end up getting into my truck. So we're pulling away from the scene of the accident. I don't even know if she was on speakerphone at this point. I don't think she was, but we're pulling away from the accident. And you could still see the EMS behind us and stuff. We're just driving, maybe a couple 100 yards away. And my son Bradley reaches over and grabs my hand, and he's like, "Dad, I promise we're going to be happy again." And at this point we had tears coming down our face, but we were like in shock. We weren't like sobbing, crying. We had no idea the extent of like the loss that we just endured. And end up driving to pick her up.
So people that
driving to pick up Monica from the house, drove to Upstate Hospital, and a ton of people met us there. And like the whole night was kind of a blur. Aside from like being at the hospital was a blur. I remember getting home that night though. It's like, because we didn't spend the night at the hospital. My daughter was completely sedated. She was sedated for 3 weeks, but we ended up going home. And I do remember walking in the house, and so Bradley shared a bedroom with Tyler, and he asked me if he can sleep with us tonight. Yeah, absolutely. And like people have just just no idea. I mean, maybe some people obviously on a podcast like this, they could relate to this, but like here we are going through that extreme amount of loss and we couldn't even really grieve. We were still praying for my daughter who's in the hospital and, looking around, and it's little things like seeing my son's toothbrush sitting there or looking in the backyard, seeing the trampoline that they would play on. And it's like, yeah, like what happened? This can't be real. And,
Well, it's almost like in your mind, you're waiting for someone to call and be like,
or wake you up.
yeah, or just to like be like, "Hey, they're fine. Maybe they're hurt or something, but they're fine." But knowing the reality of it, it's like it almost puts you in a very strange state of mind, though, because you're waiting for something that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I will, I'll give you a second, Crystal, if you want to dig in.
Yeah,
Definitely continue.
please. And this occurred how long ago?
This is July 17th of 2025. So what were we, eight months or so?
Wow. Yeah. So I'm just trying to, even for me to hear it, right? It's so shocking to imagine and think through, right? Even with my own experiences, what you describe for anyone who has experienced shock and loss like that, your brain is not made or equipped to take it in, to process it, and for it to be real. And for quite some time, I think it goes both ways, where it's like you want someone to wake you up, and then when you sleep and you wake up, you have to, because our brain just cannot fathom the layers of loss. When you speak of Bradley, he's how old now?
Yeah, so that's he's 12. He's 12.
So he had just turned 12, July 13th.
Yeah, a couple days prior.
Right.
Just amazing. When you speak to, right, like I don't know if pride's the word, but to see your son step into the role he was forced to step into, right? To be
His
there
thought was
and
to
to
care about me and comfort me.
the woman, right? Trying to, the stuffed animal in the coloring book and all the things, those were characteristics that were provided to him by you and, right, his mom. And I'm sure you, Monica, how sweet that empathy, still right now wanting to hurt feeling. And also for him to come home and to have this shared room with his brother and the loss, right? All of the things. Us as adults experience extreme loss, and we have a developed brain. For such a young human to have experienced that, and it's amazing, right? So he's 12. I mean, he's a baby. I can't, my kids are 16 and one's almost 11, but to wrap my head around that and the loss and everything you experienced together.
Some little two details I think I neglected to mention was he was in the vehicle in front of the accident, so they heard the smash, they heard the screeching tires and whatnot, and there were also 3 dogs in the car. So not only did he lose his mom, his brother, his sister, he lost his 3 dogs, and before they left for this trip, he told me that Tyler and Natasha asked him to ride with his Aunt Jem because the 3 dogs were in the car. There wasn't a lot of room. So it's like, thank God that those dogs were in that car. Not that anybody wants dogs to die, and it's just strange, and I try to lean into like trusting in God's plan, and sometimes I'm better at that than others. But this has been a journey, and it's like, of course I threw it into, we all know AI is a big thing now, and it's like I threw it into AI. What are the odds of losing 3 immediate family members in a car crash involving a tractor trailer? It's like 1 in 2.5 billion. You have better chance getting struck by lightning twice. And here we are, the husband and wife couple that talks about adversity gets put to the test with something like this. And it's like, I have no choice other than to think to myself, like, hey, like this is part of the plan, right? It's our job to create a ripple effect of hopefully comfort to other people.
I wanted to throw in there too, just to get perspective of like when he was on, like he left his work when Bradley called him and he was like over an hour away. Like he calls me and puts me on speakerphone. So I'm on the phone listening to everything and not able to do anything. And I was like, do I try to go there, or like, what do I do? I have 2 daughters. one's 18 and one's 20. So my youngest was at the house with me. So I'm like, I told her what happened. I'm like, I'm not sure what we're supposed to do. So immediately I'm like texting a couple people. I'm like, we need prayers like right now, and a couple people showed up, and yeah. So like being on the other side, like I didn't really know what to do.
And yeah, you're an observer and it's like slow motion. I feel like, right? And you're just waiting and there's no set answer. I did want to speak to Matt a few things just around religion. I know, and I get it for so many people have all different beliefs, and beliefs can also change, and faith can change, and our journey and our relationship to faith can change. But Mandy and I have spoken of this a lot. I believe where, yes, that we can, in some environments, there can be no religion or no politics. It also is a beautiful thing that the person who does have a belief, that we never deny that belief, because that is also our connection to our faith. And it's not forcing it or placing it, but it is celebrating in that belief. I'd also say when you said, like, sometimes are like this, there must be a plan. There must be a plan here.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. And I guess at that point, when we came home from the hospital, going that was a hard night for sure. But then again, you go to these moments on the outside looking in that nobody knows exist. Like, it's like, okay, what do you do outside of going to the hospital to visit my daughter who's in the ICU? What do you do on the day to day? Because that's when you make the choice. Can you drown away the pain and suffering with alcohol? Absolutely. And I would think most people would have approved of that. I say approved. I mean that kind of subjectively, but instead of going down a route where it's drugs, alcohol, you name it, I decided to go running. And I heard this quote. It was from Admiral McRaven. It was, in order to change the world, you must be your very best in your darkest moments. And that meant a lot to me way before the accident. That meant a lot to me while I was navigating other things. And of course, I thought of that. And for whatever reason, I'm like, you know what? I posted that on social media and I went out for a run. And like people, I think I might have posted something of myself out running, people knowing what we just went through, and they didn't like that. Like, and when I say they, is just pretty much like some of my best friends, because they have this expectation of grief, whereas you just lost your kids, you got to be broken. And I was like, nobody knew if I was running, crying my eyes out, trying to breathe. And it's what I chose as my outlet, and I really pushed for that. And now I'm like, hindsight 2020, I'm like, man, thank God, because I don't know what my options could have been outside of, yes, praying, yes, leaning on her. Like, thank God I have her. I don't know where I'd be without her. And so again, my daughter, she was in the ICU for 3 weeks, and I went there, a few times a week, 3 or 4 days a week, but I wasn't there every single day. And every time we went there, man, I felt like seeing my daughter like that was like a piece of me was dying. And even my son, my 12-year-old, like he's like, Dad, he's like, I really don't want to go today. And I'm like, all right, let's go do something. Let's go for a bike ride. And there were people that judged that. They say, oh, he's out having fun while his daughter's in the ICU. And I'm just like, all right, smart guy. What would you do? How would you navigate this? And
that's what I was going to say, is when other people have lost children and you haven't yet, I can't imagine what they're going through. I could never do that. I could never. And then you go through it and you're like, but I have to do something. I can't cry in bed all the time. Like, I have to try to do some sort of normal thing to just, especially when you have other children, you can't have to, there's going to be a point where you are not normal, but you are going to have some sort of normalcy in life. And so you just have to push for that. And I guess before I lost a child, I was the same way. What are they doing? I can't imagine doing that. They just lost a kid. But once it happens to you, then you realize, wow, like how strong they are for doing that.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And there's a lot of people that would be offended from this mindset, but I think so much is a choice. I think how you navigate things, and I think even grief within itself, a lot of it, I think, is a choice. Could I sit around and be broken and feel bad for myself? I feel bad for myself all the time still. I mean, this week was, for whatever reason, incredibly challenging. And but it's also a choice to get your ass up, just do something, because what good is that going to do, sitting on my ass feeling bad for myself for my son? What does that show him? And because I think I said to him, this is a day or two after the accident, I sat him down. I'm like, listen, dude, I'm like, this is going to go one of two ways, and it's our choice. Like, this is going to make us or break us. And what I mean by that is, if you can navigate through this, for the most part, it doesn't really ever get worse than this. This is pretty much as bad as it gets. So if we can get through this together, like, we're going to be all right. And I think I think I was more of that mindset because of the adversity I was already put through, which is kind of a spin on my, I guess, irony. I don't know what else to call it, but my ex-wife, in theory, got me to go to church by putting me through a lot. And because I was going to church, it got her into church. And because we were going to church, thank God we had the element of faith, which I already did. Like, I prayed and stuff prior to going, but it was a little bit of a different level. Like, how ironic is that like what I wanted to go away so bad could have been what saved me and helped me navigate. And I say navigate, like, not past tense, because we're still navigating. Like, this is brutal.
And like we said, it's just so healing, because not that there's any time that is okay for anything like this to happen, but if it happened during the hardest couple years, like, that would have changed everything in a way. So just the timing of when that accident did happen,
and the importance of Bradley seeing that healing, and seeing things get better. I mean, he saw his mom doing well before this happened. So.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
So I'll just go back to, that time frame that my daughter's in the ICU, going to the hospital occasionally, seeing her. And I've never experienced anything like that before. I never experienced being next to somebody I love and care about that's incapacitated and not conscious, and literally you can literally do nothing other than depend on the doctors and pray, and I thought for sure, we're going to have a miraculous recovery. And this is something that gets to me, where I feel a little guilty to this day. It's never really going to go away, because one of the things I said when things started getting rocky with my daughter, where she started turning into that rebellious teenager when she was 14, I remember holding her on her bedroom floor in my arms, and we were crying together. I remember saying, I'm never giving up on you. And I had to make the decision to pull life support. And I'm not saying I gave up on her, and I don't necessarily think that. But however, we've had people on our podcast that we've Ari, this person went from severe brain damage, never going to be able to walk again, being told that by the doctors, to on a dance floor in 30 days. And like, I think to myself, I'm like, what if we didn't pull life support, if there was that miraculous recovery? And I did get this, because I worked for a medical facility. I knew a neurologist, and I'm like, hey, would you mind talking to the neurologist that's saying, like, because they said there was, again, I'm speaking terms I don't really understand, but there was shearing on the left mass, the center mass, the right mass, the brain stem. It was like, it sounded bad as bad could be, from my understanding, as far as brain damage. And they said, best case scenario, if she ever wakes up, like, she'll be a complete vegetable, won't be able to talk or move or anything. So, and if we did allow that to be the case, my daughter would have kicked my ass at wherever we end up after this life. And so, I had to make that decision. And I was going into all of this not knowing. You guys familiar with the term honor walk? So, okay. So I wasn't. I'll explain it to you. An honor walk. So my daughter was a organ donor. And for the listeners that hear this, I took my daughter to get her permit when she was 16. And when I asked her if she wanted to be an organ donor, it's like, yeah, but what am I going to do with them if something happens to me? So that was her mentality, which is typical. She liked the idea of helping other people. And so the day that they're going to pull life support, there's some stuff put out on social media about this honor walk. Sure enough, a lot of people from the area we live showed up to the hospital. They lined the halls, and what we did is we play music for her, and we walk her from the ICU while the music is playing down to the OR while they pull life support. And the songs that played, there's a story behind that, but that was difficult. So it was Monica, myself, her two aunts, and Bradley and I, and there's hundreds of people in the hallways, and I'm just like, I'm like, I don't even know what's going on at this point. It wasn't even real. And I got to experience holding on to my daughter's hand and feeling the life leave her body. And the best part of this, I think, of this loss and of going through this is what we're doing right here, because I don't want sympathy. I don't want sympathy from anybody. I don't want anybody to feel bad for us. But what I personally want, and I think you guys are very similar mindset when it comes to this, is for people to hear this and be like, hey, like we were able to navigate. I say through, we're navigating through, but we were able to go through this and still not only continue going, but to make something of it, whether it's a podcast or whatever you do. Because we had somebody on our show, his name's Terry Tucker, and he's a terminal cancer hostage negotiator for the Cincinnati Police Department. And this guy said something that I think everybody on this entire planet should keep in mind, is you never have any idea how many people are watching how you handle your adversity. And it's affecting so many people. And if you don't have social media, yeah, maybe that reach is going to be a little less, and which is fine, but you're still going to have friends and family that are going to watch you. And there's people that know what you're going through. And in our case, it's like, I'd walk into the high school, man, like everybody everywhere I go, we were the family that went through hell,
Yes, yeah.
that's the situation. And,
Well, it is strange because you think that happens to those people or happens to other people, but when it happens to you, you become those people, and it's a very strange thing. But then, you take a step back and try to be as positive as you can and keep going, and that's what we're trying to do. Like you said, we just want to show people that you can not dig yourself deeper in a dark hole. Like, you're going to have moments where you're devastated and bawling and crying, and every little thing that you see might remind you of someone that you had lost. The people that you lose don't want you to be sad. I don't believe they want you to be sad.
Yeah.
And they want you to keep going.
I think of that all the time with I for whatever reason, I like to picture my son Tyler talking shit to me when I'm really, really broken. He absolutely would. And likewise, as we're talking, I'm listening to you, and when you're talking about your granny, 'cause I call my granny, which is also in her early 90s granny. Like, therapy really for me been going to therapy for like 3 years, and it's like I do it just to check it off, I guess. It doesn't really benefit me. I think conversations like this, when you have the relatable experience, it's infinitely more valuable. So I am even right now, I'm just thinking, man, I needed this conversation today. And something else I just wanted to throw in, because this is kind of a beautiful thing. So the junior class that my son was a part of, so my son Tyler, he's a big wrestler. I say he's all the things I don't really care for about myself, I try to fix in my kids. One of the things I try to fix in my kids is confidence. I've always suffered wicked from confidence issues and imposter syndrome. And Tyler, I tried to build him up from a young age, and that's why I put him in. I told him, pretty much made him join wrestling, which transformed his confidence. Loved it, and they voted him to be the prom king this year. And they presented me the crown in January in front of the junior class. Initially, they're going to mail it to me. Unless you want to come in and pick it up. And I'm like, yeah, would I be able to thank the class? I asked the principal, and he loved me too. And I'm ironically, yes, I can sit here and talk to people. This I love doing, but talking in front of a large group of people terrifies me. It's my biggest fear, public speaking. But I asked to speak to the junior class of 130 plus kids, and I was nervous, but I was more excited. And I'm picturing myself knowing what we have been through, and if I was sitting in that audience at that age, I'm like, man, I could impact somebody where everybody's going to go through hard times. Everybody's going to hit rock bottom. And that was my message to the class. I thanked them for everything, obviously. And I said to them, I'm like, everybody here is going to hit rock bottom at some point in their life. I pointed to the principal, the teachers, and I'm like, everyone, you're not going to avoid it. However, if you can think back to your junior year of high school and think about this awkward person standing in front of you right now, and that he was able to navigate that and make it through that, then you have no excuse. You have no excuse to treat people like shit. You have no excuse to go down a bad path, whether it be drugs, alcohol, and you have no excuse to give up. And I think, I don't know, I think there's many times in my life I would have benefited from hearing a similar, message, because it was hard, because it's hard to have shared empathy for a situation like this with kids that are in high school. However, I presented it to them like, I said, I'm like, the worst thing that day that happened was not losing my son, my daughter, my ex-wife. The worst thing that happened was that somebody I love and care about lost his mom, his brother, his sister, and 3 dogs. And, it's a little bit of a perspective shift there that these kids can hopefully relate to or empathize for.
Right.
One of the most detrimental things for me right off the bat that I think of that I hated more than anything was because it took every ounce of strength and discipline because it's not motivation. I wasn't motivated right after losing my kids, but I was getting out there and pushing myself to do something physically. And it wasn't obsessive. It wasn't crazy, but I would have people like reach out and be like, maybe you should take a break. Maybe you should take it easy and stuff. And I'm like, that's not what I need to hear. Like, if this is my medicine, if this is what's keeping me going, like the last thing I need to hear from anybody is that that irritated me to no end because then it made me self-conscious. Like, are people thinking I'm crazy am I doing the wrong thing? Should I be more broken than I am?
Right.
And, because I've joined a couple of grief groups and stuff, and I listen to what other people say, what they're navigating and stuff. And I've thought that a lot. I'm like, am I supposed to look like that? Is that what grief is supposed to look like? Because these people are saying how they think. Like, there's people that say I think about ending my life on a daily basis and all this other stuff. And I think people need to realize like there is zero guidance or real idea of how you're supposed to handle grief. Everybody processes it differently. And there's been so many people that feel like they can't talk to me, like whether it's friends or family, because they got stuff going on in their life that, yeah, if you compare it on paper, it may not be as bad. But like then what people do is they isolate away from you. And like I have so many people that don't talk to us at all anymore. So many friends, best friends that have just vanished out of my life. And I think a lot of it is just that. I think they compare their adversity to our adversity, which you can't do. And they think they have like, how do I complain to this person about X when they just lost their children? And that hurts me because it's like, man, like, and I feel super alone and, outside of her and, in a lot of ways, but in the same sense, I do have a lot of people that a lot of relationships we've gained through navigating this too, of people that are just incredible.
It was Dan said, I don't want it, I want support. But I was also going to say too, which I think is helpful and people don't understand, is that you want to talk about your children. Dare to talk about and bring them up, but you want to talk about them. You want to know that they mattered. You want to know that this person remembers that time from them. And people are so scared to tiptoe around not bringing them up when it's like, no, the total opposite. I want you to talk about them.
Right. Like, we don't want to be treated differently or people to avoid us. And we don't want people to think that we're these victims of this tragedy. Like, we want to continue to help people and we want people to come to us because it is therapeutic for them, but for us too. We don't want things to change because of what's happened. Right. And there's been times when people would like come up to me like pretty fresh after it and they're like, I'm so sorry and stuff. Like, how are you doing? And there was a moment where I was just like, and I had to walk away because I didn't want to start crying. And that's okay. Like, people need to know it's also okay if people are talking to you about anything, like you can get emotional. You don't have to hold it in. Though most of the time I feel like with everything that's gone on, like I am the rock and I'm the one that's like trying to keep it together to be strong for him and for Bradley and my two girls and stuff, the family. And I have my moments, but I don't know if this is a good trait or not, but I'm usually pretty good at, if my mind goes somewhere, I make it go somewhere else so I don't get like that, but I also do know. Yeah. See?
I do the same thing.
Yeah. But I also do know how important it is to talk about it and to let your feelings out. So I have my moments, even though my moments are different from his or different from Bradley's and anyone else experienced, this tragedy. But again, like, we can't compare our own feelings to any of this because it's all different. And talking about the comparison, my sister, it was like a month, I think, after the accident, my little sister, her house basically burnt down and like lost everything. And so I'm like, do like things come in threes? I do believe that. So I'm like, this has got to be it because this is like too much. And comparing loss of like someone that you love to things like, yes, like we lost people, but to her, that was the hardest thing that she's been through in her life. Like, she lost stuff and she's like that sentimental, like journals and photos. She's a photographer. So for her losing her home, her children's home, that was her hardest thing. So I can't say just because she didn't lose people, that's not tragic too.
I talk about being grateful all the time. I've heard from another podcast, actually, a guy that quoted somebody saying on their deathbed, what do you want to be remembered as? And the guy said grateful. And I am grateful for everything. I'm more grateful for her. I'm more grateful for obviously my son, but I'm grateful to be alive. I do think part of it is a choice. I choose to be that way because I could just as easily be bitter. I have every reason to be bitter, I believe, but it doesn't do any good. Gratitude, man. I think it's the best way to combat, I don't know if grief, because I think grief is incredibly important. I think it's valuable too. And it can be used as a tool. It could be the most important thing we go through. Who knows? But yeah, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for meeting new people. I wouldn't be talking to you guys if we didn't navigate this. And it's like, I think that's a beautiful thing. Not to say like, and I tell people all the time, like so many people have come to like, hey, like, thank you. You're so strong. I don't know how you do it type of thing. And I'm like, I am broken as broken can be very often. I cry all the time. And I don't mind it. I don't want to stop crying. I don't want to stop being emotional because I feel like the second I'm able to get away from that, maybe that means like my love for my kids is kind of fading. So it scares me. But yeah.
I feel like sometimes I have a fear of myself not giving away. I want to see like the gift of like keep going. Like I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to get everything out to help people like enough, if that makes sense. I don't know. Yep, I agree with you 100%.
And Matt, what you were saying is when people say you're so strong and all that stuff, people say that to me too, and it's like, well, what am I supposed to be?
Yeah,
right.
All the time.
I can't be anything else. This is who I am now, and how I have to be for my other children and for my partner. And of course I still cry, but nobody sees that. But it's just perception, I guess. Not really understanding because they haven't gone through it. Stay tuned for part 2 next week with Matt and Monica.
Consider being a supporter of the show by downloading episodes, subscribing to the podcast, or clicking the support link in the show notes. You can also leave a 5-star review wherever you listen. If you would like to share your story, please message the Facebook or Instagram page. You can also email griefandgratitudepodcast@gmail.com. Tune in next Monday for an all-new episode. This podcast was created to honor the memory of Declan Shaw ONeil and Jennifer Lynn Berry.